Brian thinks it's best if you take a cab. We'll Venmo you. That's what my daughter Rachel said to me, right there at gate A9. She was already reaching for her phone, like that was the end of it. At first, I didn't quite get what she meant. I just stood there, blinking, while the sounds of boarding calls and rolling suitcases blurred around me. I still had the casserole in one hand, the one she said would be perfect for the trip. My overnight bag was digging into my shoulder. Rachel wouldn't even look at me. She just kept staring at the Delta screen like it might save her from having to deal with me. "Mom," she said, a little softer this time, "you'll figure it out." And then she turned and walked away. Just like that. Brian was already a few steps ahead, boarding pass in hand, not even pretending to say goodbye. The last thing I saw was my grandson peeking over his dad's armrest as they disappeared down the jet bridge. He gave me this tiny wave, half sleepy, half curious. He didn't understand what was happening. Honestly, I wasn't sure I did either. Hi, I'm Evelyn Moore. I'm 68, and last Thanksgiving, I got left at the Charlotte airport like a forgotten suitcase because my daughter's husband decided I was inconvenient. I didn't cry, not then. I found a seat near the vending machines. The airport was cold in that weird way. Too much air conditioning, too much space between people pretending to be kind. I just sat there with the casserole on my lap, slowly cooling. Butternut squash, maple-glazed pecans, and a whole lot of love baked into every inch. Rachel's favorite. I made it from scratch that morning and even brought my good Pyrex dish, the one with the little blue cornflowers on the side. They didn't take it. You know, I've never liked asking for help. Rachel used to joke about it. She'd say, "That's Mom's pride problem." Maybe she was right. Maybe I should have pushed back, told them I needed to ride with them. Maybe I should have said something when Brian rolled his eyes at dinner, or when Rachel barely hugged me goodbye. But I didn't. I've spent most of my life giving more than I ever asked for. That night, I finally realized what that kind of life costs. Outside, the Uber line stretched all the way past the terminal doors. Every time they opened, the cold wind cut through like a blade. I didn't get in line. I just sat there. I thought about all the nights I rocked Rachel to sleep when she had those awful night terrors. I thought about co-signing the loan for their first home because their credit wasn't strong enough. They said it was just temporary. They promised to pay me back, and I smiled and told them, "Don't worry, it's family." Turns out, family comes with terms and conditions. There was an older woman sitting across from me. She caught my eye and gave this little nod, like she knew, like she'd seen it before. I didn't wait for the terminal to empty. I didn't check the time. I just stood up, casserole still in hand, bag over my shoulder, and I walked toward a different exit than the one they thought I'd use. The drive home felt endless. I've taken those roads 100 times, but that night, everything just blurred together into the same dull gray. And inside the car, the air was thick, with questions I couldn't bring myself to say out loud. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sky had already gone dark, and the porch light was flickering, like even it was tired of waiting for something that wasn't coming back. Inside, the silence hit hard. It clung to the walls. I kicked off my shoes, dropped my purse on the table, and checked my phone. 3 missed calls, all from me. I tried calling Rachel again, straight to voicemail. Then I called Brian. A few seconds later, I got a reply. Just a ding, a thumbs up emoji. I stared at it longer than I want to admit. My hands were shaking, not out of anger, but because something had finally landed in my chest like a stone. This wasn't just being left out. I was being erased, bit by bit. I sat down at the dining table, the one I gave them as a housewarming gift. I remembered the day they walked me through their new place, all smiles, thanking me for the temporary loan I gave them for the down payment. They never paid it back, and I never asked. I started opening the mail without really looking, just tearing envelopes, letting my hands do something while my mind wandered. Then I saw a bank logo I didn't recognize. Fairlight National. I didn't have an account there. Inside was a credit card statement. My name, their charges. Over $4,000 in home furnishings, wine deliveries, even a massage membership, all sent to their address. My heart was pounding. I leaned back and whispered to no one, "No more." The next morning, I called my neighbor Judith. She'd once mentioned a lawyer she trusted when her brother tried to steal their parents' estate. Miss Carter, she said, sharp, honest, and no nonsense. I drove downtown, past that little coffee shop Rachel used to love, the one she still tags on Instagram but hasn't invited me to in years. Miss Carter's office was tucked between a bakery and a yoga studio. Inside, it smelled like peppermint tea and worn leather, warm but serious. She greeted me with a firm handshake. You could just tell, this woman didn't mess around. She wore a dark green blazer and spoke in this calm, clear way that made even legal stuff sound human. I told her everything, at least the parts I could say without choking. She didn't interrupt, just took notes. Her eyebrows only lifted once when I mentioned the second mortgage. After going through the paperwork for about an hour, she looked up. "Mrs. Moore," she said, "I'll be honest. They've tied your name to multiple accounts, debts, and a mortgage you never signed for. You've been used." I didn't say anything. I just sat there, staring at a photo on her bookshelf, her family, smiling. Something about it hit me in the chest. "But," she said, leaning forward, "you're not powerless." That word, powerless, I'd worn it like an old swear for years. Heavy, familiar. But maybe it was time to take it off. She slid a piece of paper across the desk. "Would you like to press charges?" I looked at it, but the words didn't land. My mind was loud. Shame, betrayal, guilt, they all started fighting for attention. But under all of that, there was something else. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was resolve. I didn't answer. Not yet. And if you've ever had someone you love ignore your calls or treat your silence like permission, then maybe, just maybe, you know what I'm feeling right now. I'm not proud of how long I let things slide, but I'm here, and I'm trying to pick up the pieces. Tell me, have you ever let something go for too long just to keep the peace? If you have, drop a comment. I'd really like to know I'm not the only one. And if you want to see what happens when I finally stop staying quiet, stick around, because everything's about to change. The candle flickered, casting long, tired shadows across the kitchen table. I sat there, staring at the little puddle of wax next to a slice of store-bought birthday cake. No one had touched it. The frosting had already gone stiff. Just one candle, no card, no knock at the door. The only thing that came was an envelope from an airline slipped through the mail slot earlier that afternoon. No return address, no signature, just my name on the front, spelled right, but somehow it still didn't feel like it belonged to me. I'd spent so many years making excuses for them. They're busy. It's a hectic season. Maybe they meant to call. But that night, sitting in the yellow glow of the overhead light, wrapped in a silence that felt heavier than quiet, I stopped making excuses. My tea had gone cold, but I held the mug anyway, just something to hold while the truth settled in. Rachel hadn't just forgotten my birthday. She let me fade. Some people get flowers. I got a message I couldn't ignore. Freedom. I whispered it, just to hear how it sounded coming from me. It didn't echo. I picked up my phone. Rachel's name came up, still saved with a little heart from years ago. I held my finger on it. "Delete contact?" it asked, like even my phone needed permission to forget me too. Yes. Then I opened the file drawer under the coffee maker and pulled out a manila folder marked Important. my birth certificate, social security card, a utility bill. I slid them into my handbag, grabbed the red scarf hanging by the door, the one my mother gave me when I left for college. I hadn't worn it in years, but tonight I needed something that was mine. I called Miss Carter from the car. She picked up on the second ring, calm as ever. "I'm doing it," I said. "I'm really leaving." She paused, then said in that steady, grounded voice, "Make sure you close every joint account. I sent you a list." So I drove to the bank, closed every account Rachel had been using like it was hers, opened a new one under my maiden name, Evelyn Carter. Funny how saying that name again felt like opening a window. Back home, I moved quietly, like someone sneaking out of the life she no longer wanted. I set my house keys on the dining table next to a note. Just 6 words. "Don't look for me. You taught me how to leave." I didn't pack much, just a weekend bag, my documents, and a folded postcard I'd tucked away years ago in an old recipe book. Seabrook, Florida, a little beach town with pastel houses and a marina that looked like something out of a dream. At the Charlotte Amtrak station, I waited on the platform, scarf wrapped tight, wind tugging at the edge of my coat. A young man, maybe in his 30s, came by and punched my ticket. He didn't ask where I was going, and I appreciated that. When the train pulled out, the city lights blurred behind me. I leaned my head against the cool glass and listened to the steady rhythm of the tracks. And I breathed, really breathed. Not those shallow little sips I'd been surviving on for years, but full, deep breaths, like no one was watching. They thought they left me, but I left first. And this time, I won't write back. Florida didn't exactly welcome me with open arms. There wasn't some magical breeze waiting to sweep me into a new chapter, no sunshine moment that made me feel instantly changed. Just a creaky ceiling fan, the faint smell of lemon polish, and a key to room 207 at the Seabrook Inn. It used to be a motel. Now it's mostly long-term stays for seniors and women like me. The clerk handed me the key without even looking up from his crossword puzzle. I appreciated that. I didn't want small talk. I didn't want to be seen. The room wasn't much. Beige carpet, a chipped dresser, a window with a view you'd forget unless you made an effort to remember it. But it was clean, and it didn't have any ghosts. That meant more than I thought it would. I dropped my bag on the bed and sat down beside it. The air was still, sticky in that Florida kind of way. I let out a slow breath, not the kind you take after doing chores or keeping quiet at dinner. This one felt different, lighter. I didn't know what to do with that feeling. The first few days were quiet. I walked to the pier and back, just watching life happen around me. At the inn, voices floated through the thin walls. Reruns playing on TVs, someone talking to a cat, and Eleanor's laugh echoing down the hall like she owned the place. I met her by accident, or maybe she planned it. "I see you're new," she said one morning, leaning over the railing outside my door, oversized sunglasses on, wrapped in a caftan that looked straight out of a soap opera. "We don't get many dignified women around here. You hiding or healing?" I didn't answer. She didn't seem to need one. That afternoon, I found a note slipped under my door. It was handwritten in purple ink. "Porch tea, Wednesdays at 3, no excuses. Eleanor." I went. I don't know why. Maybe because someone finally asked me to. There were 4 of us that first day. Mr. Benson, who fed the stray cats and told long-winded stories. June, who painted seashells and never said a word. Eleanor, of course, bold, sharp, impossible to ignore. And me. I didn't say anything, just held my teacup like it might vanish if I blinked. No one asked about my past. Nobody wore their pain like a badge. Here, the present was enough. I started journaling, not about Rachel or Brian or all those bitter holidays I swallowed in silence. I wrote about the sea, the motel walls, the way the sunlight hit the blinds when the day started to fade. I wrote my name, Evelyn Carter, over and over again, like I was learning how to spell it all over. One night, I came across an old photo tucked in my wallet. It was the front porch of my old house, the one Rachel lives in now. I thought it would wreck me, but it didn't. I cried, but they were quiet tears. Not from pain, but from letting go. That house didn't hold me anymore, and neither did they. I closed my journal and stared up at the ceiling fan, still humming gently overhead. Something in me had shifted. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was real. I used to think I was just Rachel's mom. Now I'm starting to wonder what else I might be. I didn't think I'd ever bake again. Just the idea of folding butter into flour brought back too many memories. Birthdays no one showed up for, holidays where I did all the work but never really got to enjoy any of it. But there was something about the Florida air, humid, slow, forgiving in a way, like it understood I had time now, like it was daring me to try soft things again. So I baked. Banana bread. Simple, sweet. The kind I used to make when Rachel was little and too sick to go to school. She once told me, "You make things instead of saying things." It wasn't meant as a compliment, but it wasn't exactly wrong either. I brought it out to porch tea on a paper plate, covered in foil. I didn't say anything, just handed a warm slice to Eleanor like I was handing her a secret. She raised an eyebrow, sniffed it like she was judging a wine pairing. Brown sugar and maternal guilt, my favorite. Everyone laughed, even Marta, who rarely smiled. She was always there, quiet and polite, her shoulders kind of folded in, like she was used to being blamed for things that weren't her fault. After the bread, something shifted. The mood softened. June told a story about a date gone wrong with a guy who believed essential oils could fix his divorce. Eleanor shared one of her Florida survival tips involving duct tape, ants, and tequila. The sky around us faded into soft pink and blue, like it was saying sorry. And then Marta spoke. "My son took out a credit card in my name," she said, eyes locked on the little citronella candle flickering between us. "He told me it was temporary, that he'd pay it off in a month. That was 2 years ago." I didn't say anything right away, just tore another slice of banana bread in half and handed her the bigger piece. "Do you still get the statements?" I asked. She nodded. "I don't open them anymore. They make my hands shake." The next morning, she knocked on my door. She had a manila envelope full of bank records and a look I knew all too well. Tired, ashamed, quietly desperate. We sat at my little kitchenette table, papers spread out like puzzle pieces. I don't have a finance degree, but I knew what to look for now. Sudden transfers, forged initials, the same patterns I'd seen in my own mess. Eleanor stopped by halfway through. She saw the table and said, "Good Lord, it looks like a crime scene. Please tell me we're burning something after this." I smiled. Just bridges. That night, I started something called Tuesday Talks. Nothing official, just a few of us getting together to sort through numbers, share stories, remind each other we weren't crazy, and we weren't alone. Marta's documents made it clear. Her son had signed her name on a second mortgage. The handwriting was messy, but it was his. My chest tightened, not just for her, but for the version of me who would have tucked something like that away and told herself, "Don't rock the boat." I looked at Marta. She was shaking. "You didn't deserve this." She nodded, eyes glassy. I didn't either. And what I felt in that moment wasn't rage. It was clarity. Quiet, focused, like maybe the way forward wasn't just healing for myself, but helping others too. I didn't know if I could fix her life, but I knew exactly what it felt like to be taken from, and I was done staying quiet. I typed her name, then backspaced, then typed it again. Rachel Moore. It looked strange sitting there on the screen. Too formal, too distant. The kind of name you see on documents, not something filled with love. The email I wrote didn't beg. It didn't ask why. It just started with the truth. You hurt me. You let it happen too. And I let it happen too. But I didn't send it. I just stared at it for 3 days, letting it sit in my drafts folder like spoiled milk in the back of the fridge, something you know you need to throw out, but can't quite bring yourself to. I finally closed the laptop and took a long breath, letting the warm March air drift through the window. A lawnmower buzzed somewhere off in the distance. A mockingbird shouted at nothing. Florida has this way of making even grief feel humid. At the community center, the computer lab had that faint smell of printer ink and lemon disinfectant. The woman next to me was trying to figure out Facebook. She kept whispering, "Where's the like button?" like it held all the answers. I logged into the joint account Brian had insisted we keep, just in case. Well, turns out the case was him using it like his own personal piggy bank. Monthly withdrawals labeled maintenance, vendor payments, all draining under my name. I stared at the numbers, and they weren't just dollars. They were bruises, tiny dents in my trust. The next morning, I walked into the Seabrook Bank wearing my best blouse and the calmest face I could manage. Marcia, the woman behind the desk, looked up and gave me this tight little smile. "What can I do for you today, Miss Moore?" I smiled back, just as tightly. I'd like to cut someone off. Her eyes sharpened. Let's get to it. She walked me through everything, unlinking accounts, freezing access, filing fraud claims. Her fingers flew across that keyboard like she'd done it 100 times, probably had, for women who looked a lot like me. At one point, she paused. "Who's Brian?" "My son-in-law," I said. She nodded. Always the son-in-law. When we finished, she handed me a stack of papers. "Here's confirmation. He can't touch a cent anymore." I thought I'd cry, but I didn't. All I felt was still, like a table that finally stopped wobbling after years of leaning. Back home, I printed out the last 2 statements, ran a highlighter over the worst of it, then fed each page into the shredder Eleanor had lent me. It hummed softly, like a sigh, a clean break you can actually hold in your hands. That night, I opened the draft to Rachel one last time. I read it slowly. Then I deleted it. She knows where I am if she ever wants to find me, but I'm not waiting in the doorway anymore. Later, the fraud department called to let me know the investigation into Brian's activity was officially underway. I'd done what I needed to do, legally, emotionally. The rest, that was his mess to deal with now. He'll call, he'll yell, he'll try to scare me, but this time he'll do it with no money and nowhere to hide. If you've ever had to walk away from someone you love just to find some peace, you're not alone. I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to protect yourself from your own family? Leave me a comment. I read every one. And stay with me, because what came next wasn't revenge. It was quieter than that. Something I never thought I'd get back. A life of my own. I'll see you in the next chapter. The envelope felt heavy in my hand, thicker than bills, too stiff to be anything casual. It had that smell, toner, and arrogance. I hadn't heard from Brian in almost a year, but the second I saw his name printed at the top in that fancy font, my stomach dropped. Just like it did years ago when I first co-signed a line of credit for him and Rachel. The motel clerk handed it to me like it was just another piece of mail. "Looks official," she said. I nodded, thanked her, and walked back to room 207 with a kind of stillness I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't fear, not anymore. It was something quieter, like the way sand settles after a storm. Inside, I opened it slowly. The words stared back at me. Notice of civil action. Brian was suing me. Emotional distress, business losses, defamation. I actually laughed at that last part. Brian wouldn't know defamation if it introduced itself at a dinner party. He claimed I froze our accounts out of spite, that I ruined some kind of investment deal, that I slandered him in the community, a community I hadn't stepped foot in for over a year. And the part that really got me, he said I abandoned my daughter. I stood there in my little kitchenette, the fridge humming in the background like a warning, and just like that, I wasn't 68 anymore. I was 35 again, standing outside a notary's office, pen in hand, after Rachel had cried and paced like a salesman about to lose a deal.
"It's just temporary, Mom," she'd whispered. "Please, for me." Back then, love meant signing papers. Now, love meant saying no. I picked up the phone and called Miss Carter. She answered on the second ring. "Was expecting your call," she said, calm as ever. I read the document out loud. She listened quietly, then asked, "Want my professional opinion?" "Always." "He's bluffing. This is noise. He's trying to scare you into silence." "I'm not scared," I said, and I meant it. That surprised me. We went over what to do next. Court filings, statements, copies of everything I'd already shut down. She said she'd file a motion to dismiss. I told her I wouldn't let old guilt drag me back into old mistakes. After we hung up, I sat down at my little table. Outside, the palm trees rustled like they were listening in. Spring in Florida smells like damp earth and jasmine. It's a beautiful season to end something. I pulled out the old checkbook, one of the last things with both our names on it, and laid it flat. Then I lit a match from the emergency candle in my drawer. No hesitation. The paper curled fast, turned black, brittle. Ash dropped into this little ceramic ashtray Eleanor gave me. She said it was just for decoration. Funny how even burning something down can feel neat. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I just watched it turn into something lighter than it had ever been. They'd taken a lot from me. Time, money, trust. But they couldn't take this. They couldn't take my clarity. You can mistake someone's kindness for weakness, but eventually, even the quietest woman remembers her voice. And I was just starting to use mine. Charlotte felt colder than I remembered. The courthouse hadn't changed much. Same faded gray carpet holding on to too many secrets, same smell of old coffee and worn-out paper. But I had changed. Maybe it was the Florida sun still clinging to my skin. Or maybe it was just that this time I wasn't here as someone's mother or someone's fool. I was here as myself. Brian sat 2 rows ahead of me, fidgeting with his tie like he thought this was a fashion trial, not a fraud case. Rachel was next to him. Her hair was shorter, her coat was nicer, but she still wouldn't look at me. And that silence between us, it had grown sharp. It had grown teeth. When our case was called, Brian stood up like he was about to give a TED Talk. He threw around phrases like emotional distress, financial sabotage, harm to reputation, even sighed at all the right moments. If I hadn't known him, I might have believed he actually cared about something other than his own reflection. Judge Morrison listened quietly, fingers pressed together under his chin. You could tell he'd seen men like Brian before. The kind who show up full of self-righteousness, but with nothing to back it up. When it was my turn, I didn't look at Brian, didn't look at Rachel. I looked straight ahead. I handed over the folder Miss Carter had helped me put together. Every withdrawal, every unauthorized charge, every message, neatly time-stamped and labeled. I walked them through the timeline. I answered every question calmly, clearly, just the facts. At one point, Judge Morrison asked, "Miss Moore, why didn't you take legal action sooner?" I didn't flinch. I said, "Because I loved them, and because I thought I had time." He nodded once. That was enough. When Brian objected, said I had no right to touch his accounts, I handed over the co-ownership agreement. Judge Morrison raised an eyebrow. "This shows her name on every page," he said. Brian's lawyer had nothing to say after that. And Rachel, for just a second, she looked at me. Her lips moved. "I'm sorry." No sound, just breath and guilt. But that was the most honest thing she'd given me in years. The judge didn't take long.
Case dismissed. Mr. Fields, your accounts will be flagged pending fraud investigation. Miss Moore, you acted within your full legal rights. Brian didn't stand, didn't shake hands. He just sat there and stared. And when he finally looked at me, it wasn't like looking at family. It was like someone who had just lost his best asset. I stood up slowly, no smile, no moment of triumph, just a deep breath, the kind I hadn't taken in months. My sweater, a soft green, brushed against my arms as I reached for my coat. It was my mother's favorite color. She used to say it made my eyes softer. But today, it made me sharper. As I walked out, the courthouse door closed behind me with a dull thud. I didn't look back. Let them sit there, with their silence and their stories. I was done performing. The auction notice went live right at 9 a.m. Just one simple digital line. 3-bedroom home, suburban Charlotte, co-owned by Evelyn Moore. Clear title, court-certified sale. It looked cold, dry, like it meant nothing. But to me, it was a heartbeat. By 4 p.m., they called. I didn't pick up. Later that night, Rachel's voice landed in my motel voicemail, thin and shaky. Mom, we didn't know you were going this far. Can we talk? No apology, no accountability, just panic. And it sounded exactly like it used to. Brian followed up with an email, 5 paragraphs, 3 threats, 1 sentence about disgrace.
I didn't read past the second line. His words always started out neat, then bent themselves into lies. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the screen again. The listing was still up, bidding open for 1 more hour. The photo showed that house on Rosewood Lane. White shutters, porch swing I'd ordered from a catalog back in '97. The tree we planted when Rachel got into college. For years, I'd held that house like it was a promise. They held it like a trophy, a prize they forgot they didn't win alone. Miss Carter had walked me through everything: the title, the down payment, the lien release, even the old property tax records from the year Rachel said they just needed help to get started. I'd kept it all. I always kept everything. I just didn't know I'd need to. While the final bids came in, I stepped outside. The motel wind chimes clinked in the breeze, soft like applause. Seashells lined my windowsill now, little stories from the ocean, rough and imperfect, but beautiful. I took the sandy path down to the water. My phone buzzed again. Rachel, again. I turned it off. Then I kicked off my sandals and let the ocean touch my feet. The tide was gentle, the sun hung low, painting the sea in soft pink. That's when the notification came in. Winning bid confirmed, transfer pending. Just like that, the house wasn't theirs anymore. It wasn't mine either. It was just finished. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just let the breeze carry whatever pieces of me were still clinging to those walls. Later that night, I sat at the little wooden table by the window and opened a velvet box. Inside was a necklace I'd bought with the first deposit. Simple, silver, just 2 letters engraved. E.M. Not mom, not grandma, not cosigner, just me. Somewhere, they were packing up boxes. I was unpacking silence. And for the first time, it finally felt like enough. Rachel called 3 times last week. I didn't pick up. Brian emailed twice. I didn't open either one. It's not anger anymore, just stillness, the kind that doesn't need noise or answers. This silence, it's not punishment, it's peace. The morning I got the final letter, the air smelled like rain on driftwood. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, with his name printed in bold, Brian Fields. Notice of bankruptcy filing. The ink felt too sharp for a man who built everything on my back, then turned his back the moment I stood up. I read it once, slowly, no shock, no satisfaction, just acknowledgement. Then I folded it, slid it into the drawer next to my lavender candle, and lit the wick. The scent rose soft and steady, curling through the room like a lullaby. I didn't need to respond.
the world already had. That evening, I walked barefoot to the community dinner down on the beach. The sky was glowing gold and pink. Folding tables were scattered across the sand, covered with casseroles, pitchers of sweet tea, and paper lanterns flickering like quiet little promises. Eleanor spotted me and waved me over. Her silver earrings caught the last light of the day. She had on that same turquoise shawl she always wears, like it's her version of armor. "You look light," she said, handing me a paper plate and a slice of peach pie. "Feels that way," I said, and it did. Marta showed up a little later, carrying extra chairs. She brought someone new, a woman in her early 60s, wrinkled face, quiet eyes, like she hadn't really been seen in a long time. Her name was Lisa. Her son had moved her into an apartment temporarily and hadn't called back in 6 months. She didn't say much, just sat there, fingers twitching along the edge of her cup, and I recognized that silence. It's the kind you hold when you're scared your voice won't matter. So I sat next to her. I gave her what I could, a smile, a refill of sweet tea, and a nod that simply said, "I get it. You're not invisible here." I wore my necklace that night, just like I do every day now. EM, my initials, my name, no one else's. After dinner, I went back to my room, kicked off my sandals, and opened a little tin box on my nightstand. Inside was the last photo I had of Rachel. She was 18, wearing a college hoodie, grinning, whipped cream on her nose. I looked at it for a long time. Not with sadness, not even regret, just acceptance. She once told me, "You raised me to be strong," and I did. She just forgot I'm strong too. I tore the photo in half, not out of hate, but to release it. I placed it gently in the trash. It didn't feel like throwing something away. It felt like finishing a chapter that had stayed open too long. Outside, the wind shifted. The tide rolled in, steady, certain. You can only scream at a locked door for so long. Eventually, you just walk away. I used to spend every birthday cooking for everyone else. This year, they cooked for me. Of course, it was Eleanor who tricked me. "Just come by the center," she said. "There's a documentary playing, something about flamingos and single malt whiskey." I raised an eyebrow, but followed her anyway. You learn not to argue with Eleanor once she puts on her lipstick and that little knowing smile. The Seabrook Community Center looked the same on the outside, plain, unassuming. But the second I walked in, I was caught in a gentle ambush. String lights twinkling across the ceiling, something sweet and warm in the air, and voices, familiar voices, singing just off-key enough to make it feel real.
"Happy birthday, Evelyn!" They made a banner, cut out letters from old magazines. It said, "To EM, not just a mother." I blinked, once, twice, then laughed so hard I had to grab the table to keep from falling over. The tables were covered with mismatched cloths, wildflowers in mason jars, and bowls of potato salad that definitely broke every food safety rule. Right in the middle sat a carrot cake with 70 crooked candles, yes, all 70, dancing in the drafty air. "Don't breathe too hard," Eleanor whispered. "You'll set off the smoke alarm and spend your birthday in jail." I didn't know what to say. Me, the woman who used to beg for a phone call on her birthday, now standing in a room full of people who had started out as strangers, but had somehow become something softer, something that felt like family. I tried to say thank you, tried to raise a glass, say something, anything, but all I got out was, "I," before my voice caught. Eleanor clinked her plastic cup against mine and said, "She's overwhelmed," which is rare and adorable, so I'll say what she meant. "You're all beautiful weirdos, and she loves you." Everyone laughed, even Marta, who usually smiles like it costs her something. I finally found my words. "To the women we used to be," I said, raising my glass, "and the ones we're still becoming." Nobody clapped. They didn't need to.
We just looked at each other the way people do when they've lived through something and know it. Later, someone handed me a card, handmade. Inside, it read, "To EM, not just a mother. You're more than who you've lost. You're who you chose to become." I ran my fingers along the edge of the card like it was a photograph, not because it captured something, but because it gave something back. Then someone pressed a fork into my hand. "Eat before Eleanor goes back for a third slice." I smiled because, yeah, that part was absolutely true. The candles burned low. The cake was soft. The room smelled like cinnamon, old perfume, and new laughter. I didn't make a wish this year. For the first time in a long time, I didn't need to. I never expected a second life, but somehow, here I am, right in the middle of it. If you've ever had to start over, really start over, you know it doesn't come in one big moment. It comes in pieces. A slice of cake, a quiet toast, a room full of people who actually see you. Have you ever been surprised by kindness after thinking maybe you'd never feel it again? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And stay with me. Because in the final chapter, someone knocks on my door. Not to take, but to return something I thought I'd lost for good. The pier was quiet, just the way I like it now. I walked slowly, steam from my coffee curling into the morning air. The sun had just started to rise, brushing the water in soft gold and rusty pink. I wasn't wearing makeup, didn't do anything special with my hair. I didn't need to. A year ago, I thought I'd disappeared, thought walking away meant erasing myself from the people who used to be my whole world. But this stillness, this light, this breath I didn't have to ask permission for, this is where I actually showed up. I paused halfway down the pier, leaning on the rail, weathered smooth from salt and time. In my hand was a small seashell. Nothing remarkable. I'd found it a few days back, shaped kind of like a curled ear. I'd held onto it the way I used to hold on to birthdays, old emails, and the way Rachel used to say "Mom" like it still meant something. But now, I was ready to let it go. I didn't cry, didn't say a word. I just opened my palm and let the shell fall. It slipped beneath the surface without a splash, just a ripple, and that was enough. Somewhere, Rachel was probably waking up in a different house, maybe still blaming me, maybe wondering how I could just walk away. But I didn't vanish. I walked away from a story that stopped being true. I left the airport with empty hands, but a heart that still had more to give. I lived through silence, through betrayal, through birthdays no one remembered, and I filled all of that with something new. My breath, my name, my life. People like to say mothers are made to sacrifice. Maybe that's true, but we're not made to be erased. That day on the pier, I passed a young couple with a stroller. The baby had cheeks like little summer peaches. The woman smiled at me, kind of uncertain. I smiled back, not with sadness or longing, just kindness. That's all I had left, and somehow it was more than enough. I sipped my coffee and sat down at the bench at the very end of the dock. I thought about my little motel room with its wind chimes and orchids, about Marta laughing more these days, about Eleanor still rocking red lipstick at 8 in the morning, about the women I'd met and the woman I'd become. I thought of everything I used to wait for, an apology, a return, a miracle. None of those came. But I did. I came back to myself. I used to think disappearing meant giving up, but really, it was how I started showing up, for me. Some mornings, I still wake up thinking I'm back in that cold airport chair, waiting to be seen. But now, I wait for nothing. I rise, I breathe, and I live fully in the life I chose. Because sometimes walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. When love turns into silence, you get to make peace in your own way. And if you've ever been forgotten by the people you raised, I want you to hear this. You are not lost. You're just walking a path they never cared enough to follow. If this story reminded you of something you've lived, or something that still lingers, leave a comment. I'll be reading them, with coffee in hand. And if you'd like to walk a little farther with me, stay for the next story. My son screamed at dinner, "You're a burden to our family. Go away." I stood up. And sometimes, standing up doesn't just change the dinner, it changes everything.